Hello, friends. I'm Laverne Friesen, and this is The True Emotion Dad, the podcast where we dive deep into real stories, healing journeys, and the powerful lessons we've learned along the way. We explore all aspects of mental health, trauma, healing, and spirituality, but we don't shy away from the darker sides of our experiences. By sharing raw and unfiltered truth, we aim to educate, inspire, and help others on their healing journeys. Please be gentle with yourself as you listen today. We will be discussing healing and spirituality, and there may be parts of the conversation that activate emotions within you. I am so excited for this episode, and I know everyone listening will be enriched by the conversation we had. Our guest is Ellie Laliberté, who is an international award-winning author and spiritual coach. Her deepest desire is to be of service to individuals who are ready to explore higher states of consciousness so they can free themselves from the constraints of their conditioning. She lives a simple yet profound life and is committed to her spiritual practices, making peace be the theme of her life. Her book, Letters from You to You, is the product of years of emotional healing and wisdom received from studying mindfulness, psychology, philosophy in the spiritual realm. She is also a book coach, helping others bring their inspiring stories to life as future authors. Good morning and welcome to the show, Ellie.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share your experience and share this book with us. I've been reading a little bit of it, and so much has resonated with me. Can you tell us, how did you get to this point in your life where you wrote this book?
Yeah, so I've always kind of been a writer since the age of like 15, I would say. I started writing because I was an artist and I was a singer, and so I expressed myself through songs. So that's kind of how my writing started, where I would, write lyrics of love songs mainly. And then it just developed into, more profound writing as I got older in my 20s because I dove into spirituality and, philosophies and even psychology, like all self-development things in my 20s. So I really just started, writing about what I was exploring and what I was learning about all of that. So it gave me kind of like this space where I could just be me and learn about who I truly am through my writing. And eventually, as I wrote like every single day, and I'm still writing every day, it turned out that I had a desire to, yeah, to be an author, to write a book. It was just kind of like a natural next logical step, if you want. And I wrote the first book when I was in my late 20s, around 27. That book was in French, and yeah, I loved the experience. It was a totally different experience of what I actually had with the second book, but it was the first experience, and it gave me that kind of I would say confidence that I could write a book. Because, it's not everybody I feel that can write a book. You can write a lot, but it doesn't mean that you can actually, put a book out there easily. So then when I got that out, I didn't know that I was going to write another book because I just thought that I had, when you have a dream and the dream gets realized, well, sometimes you just did the dream and you don't really want to push anything more, right? So I kind of felt like it was done in a way. But yeah, to my surprise, I had another book in me 10 years later. So,
Yeah.
so that's how the book came out. Yeah.
So this book, Letters from You to You, is, I imagine, a very healing journey for you. Just in the snippets I've read, I can see that how it was. It's a very deep, insightful book, and there has to be a journey in your life to get you to that point where you're going to go that deep. Um, Kind of tell us how you got there in terms of, your own growth, perhaps what your childhood was like.
Mhm.
And I'm going to come back to that because there's a chapter in the book that to me was very telling. but may not be so much for our listeners. And just tell us what was that journey like?
Yeah. So, when I was young, I was a very curious child, and I just wanted to express that curiosity. I wanted to be free at being this imagine like I really used a lot of my imagination when I was young, and what had happened, and it's no fault to anyone because this is just a way sometimes that we are raised, but I I felt like my light was dismissed a lot in my childhood. So I felt small, and as if I could not be that kind of like shining light because I was too much, or and I felt like I was annoying or disrupting other people's um just disrupting other people's kind of like way of thinking and doing things, and it always felt like I was probably too dramatic, too sensitive. So this is what I kind of, that was the flavor that I got left with when I was young. And when you're young, you don't have a voice. You can't speak up because you don't know what you can say or what you can't say. And if you continue to always be dismissed, it builds that character. And so I was kind of like, I didn't feel like I belonged much. And it took me a really long time to get to a point where I needed to find out why I don't belong, because when that happens, I mean, that's your conditioning. And if you don't have that self-awareness, you're not even really going to be asking the profound questions of why you act the way that you act, or you're offended easily by someone that says something to you, or whatever trigger, you don't really explore that. But like, I feel that it was really my journey to have that self-awareness. When I was 21, I kind of discovered that, and I had an awakening. And the awakening that I had was not something so much spiritual that kind of happened to me. It was mostly like, again, it was my curiosity that came back, where a friend of mine, committed suicide. And it was just me kind of like wanting to know where he was going and being almost like frustrated at life because I didn't understand that part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened with that is, throughout that curiosity, that I didn't think it was really about me discovering me, right? Throughout
Yeah.
that curiosity of wanting to know like what happens when someone really dies and where are they going, it opened up an entire world for me of just like, oh my God, we are so much more than just this meat suit with these thoughts and this, and anyways, I just went really, really deep into like exploring who I was. And at the beginning, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't intentional that I wanted to explore who I was. I just really wanted to explore what is out there that is bigger than what I've learned, in my childhood. And it just, yeah, when you do that, then it opens up doors for you to see like your inner world as what is the most important thing, and how there's so much illusion in the outside world. And so yeah, it is what kind of like made me go into the spirituality. But throughout my entire 20s, it was all about learning. It was all about exploring. It was all about being, again, very curious as to what is all of this. But I wasn't still ready in my 20s. I didn't have the maturity yet to know that I needed to heal a lot. Like, I had a
Mm.
lot of things that I still needed to heal. I didn't have that maturity in my 20s. I only had the capacity and the will to learn something that was, just the unknown, and being very excited about learning all of that. But I didn't know how to integrate
Mm.
any of it, because I wasn't making that space yet. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's what happens in this industry, is like people are very, very, um, curious and wanting to learn and learn and learn and learn, but then they're only learning and they're not making space to see actually what they need to integrate. And so they have a lot of knowledge, but they don't have a lot of practice or integration.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, not, I'm not faulting anybody in here, but this is what lacks sometimes in, like, when we become very, like, we have this awakening. Well, we have to bring us back down to and ground ourselves in there, where we can actually go and find out, like, how can I free myself from my conditioning now that I have all of this knowledge? Where does that fit in within me, right? So at the age of 30, I had another, if you want to call it an awakening, because that's what it is. When you have contrast, and like big contrast, it brings an expansion, right? And
Mm-hmm.
without that contrast, you can't really see what's really going on in your reality. So it's a gift. And sometimes it feels like it's really like chaos and it's very negative, but it's very much a gift in disguise, right? So I got separated, and I was not expecting to get a separation with my ex-husband that I was in a relationship with for 12 years. And even though I was very, you know, very curious about all of this, and going into my knowledge and everything like that, and I knew a lot of things, there was another level of understanding that happened when I got to the point where I was left by myself alone without basically anyone. I had lost so many things when that happened. I lost my business that I had with my ex-husband that we had built. So I lost all of my money, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I lost that. I lost, even, like, I had to give away my two dogs, and I don't have kids, so that my dogs were kind of like my kids. So I
Yeah.
needed to give them away for the sake of, like, survival mode, because that's exactly what I was into. I was in a state of survival mode, in a state of shock, and I didn't really understand much about my life. Even though I had all of this knowledge and that spirituality, I had no idea what the hell was going on. And I needed to rediscover something. But I didn't know that I needed to start rediscovering who I am without anything outside of me, which is very scary at first.
Oh
And
yeah.
so that's what brought me into this healing journey. And I had other events, like, that was just a beginning. And I had other events throughout my 30s that made that, okay, you got to lose some more so you dissolve more and know who you are without these things that you get attached to, or identify yourself to. So a lot of surrendering and experiences.
Yeah, it's crazy how these so-called traumatic events in our lives that turn into the catalyst for so much growth and healing, and looking back, they're the best thing that happened to us, at least in that time period.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very strict religion where divorce was absolutely the worst case scenario, and it was a sin. And so I stayed in a relationship for much longer than I should have,
Mm.
partially because of that. And I felt like my world was falling apart, and my life was over. But yet, looking back, it was a catalyst for so much healing and growth. And so incredibly grateful for that. You had said something to the effect of you found your curiosity again. And I think it's such a shame that as children, we're so open and innocent and curious, and we ask questions that the adults in our lives don't want to answer and don't want us asking.
Mhm.
And then, you know, fast forward, say 30 years, and you're asking these questions yourself. I want to take a quote from your book,
Sure.
and it says, and I, by the way, I love it. And it says, we all have a default self. That self is constructed of patterns we developed in our childhood and that we had never been taught to heal. The little kid inside of us that carried the wounds into our adulthood, that self created an identity. And that's so true. I I say it less eloquently. I say we all have an inner child that's driving our adult bus.
Yeah.
Um, but it, and I think when we understand that about everyone around us and everyone in the world, we can start to have some understanding and empathy for people,
Oh, yeah.
and realize that, you know, some of these people, most of us, are just children in adult bodies,
Exactly.
wounded children
Yes.
in
Wounded
adult
children.
bodies. Your friend's suicide, I imagine there was a lot of grief there. One thing in my own life, and you can expand on this, is that the grief that I feel or felt, experienced, has often been the catalyst for so much more.
Mhm.
It's a lesson that's not even packaged as a gift because it just hurts so much,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I hear you say that with your separation as well, is
Mhm.
that grief spurred you to further heights, I guess, hey?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know what I've discovered with my own grief of losing so many things that were outside of me throughout the last couple of years. And it wasn't just, a death of a loved one or something like that. It was really just anything in my life that I kind of lost, whether that was someone that I cared about, whether and again, not because they died, but because they went away from my reality, or whether that was even a business that I was into. And what I realized is like grief, when we're grieving something, someone, we're actually grieving a part of us. We're letting something inside of us, like a part of us, die. So that's why it's very difficult. And actually, that's how I, maybe not that experience for everybody, but that's how I kind of perceived it with my own life, is like the reason why we're grieving so much is because we actually feel like there's a part of us that is dying. So it's not so much the thing or the person that we're grieving, but it's a part of us that we're letting go with that. Because we identified again with that thing or that person. And so the pain of it is because we're letting that energy out of our out of our system, out of us, and again, it's kind of like that little kid that is it's a part of that little kid that is dying. And it's not easy because we identify so much with the outside world as being what we are, and we forget that we are so much more than whatever is happening to us, whatever is showing up in our reality as physical outside of us. We're like even more and so much more than our own emotions. Some people identify so much with their emotions as well. So there's a big detachment that needs to be done in society for people to actually start seeing that, you know, there is so much freedom in understanding that, and peace. And this is why yes, like peace is the theme of my life. There's so much beauty, there's so much freedom in understanding the peace and detachment. And I do have a letter in my book that is on the art of detachment, so that people understand what it means. Because sometimes people think that detachment means that we're not loving anymore, we're not caring anymore, but it's not that at all. It's actually freeing yourself from just identifying your being with that person or that thing, because that's taking all of your power, you know. And even when it comes to death, I mean, like physical death, people are taking that very seriously in the sense where it's negative, and it's not negative, but we've been conditioned as it's negative to have someone who dies, like because we don't want to understand it. Like there's still a lot of ignorance in death and taboo in death. And it's not so different from anything that you're actually losing in your life. It's just something else that you have to grieve. But it's also, there's a lot of beauty in whatever is leaving your life, because you're making space for something new that matches with your true self to come in. And so the grief in all of it is like, because people are so afraid of going into the unknown, in the uncertainty. But the uncertainty is all of life. That's what life really is. And it's kind of like people have just not understood at all what it all means. And because we're always trying to put meaning on everything and on everyone, right? And we can't just let life unfold the way that it's supposed to unfold. And it's so impersonal. So that's where the pain comes from identity,
Yeah.
identifying with everything.
Wow, that's so beautiful, and I feel like I have to put this on pause, go sit down for a couple hours, think about what you said, and come back here to have some wise commentary. But I love that so much, because we're letting go, and it's that default self that was created that you talk about that we're letting go of.
Yeah.
And it is so scary because we want certainty and we know that it's uncertain. I love your non-resistant or peaceful view to life, and that's something that has been um, a, a learning opportunity for me as well. And you can find peace and calm in extremely difficult times in life when you release that attachment. And it's hard to explain in a short podcast episode. And yes, my mind is still reeling from the wisdom you just dropped. I love it. I can't wait to finish the rest of this book. I'm curious though, did you grow up in religion?
No, I
No.
didn't.
Okay. And so I'm kind of curious about that because I feel that a lot of the religious indoctrination strengthens that default self we have,
Hmm.
and and you know, for example, death. It brings there's so much fear around death
Yes.
or dying and having to be perfect so you don't go to hell or whatever it might be. And I think death is such a beautiful thing. It's and I'm sure you feel the same way. It's passing on to the next stage of life,
Yes,
and
exactly.
and quite possibly it's healing as we ditch our human bodies that for most of us are by when we die are old and not functioning as properly, maybe beaten and broken, whatever it might be, right? And
Hmm.
I just thought of that now, that death is a healing thing. But it is that next stage. And I often describe healing in kind of how you were talking about how it's so scary. It's it reminds me of that quote, the treasure you seek is in the cave you fear to enter. And every time I've entered a cave that's been dark and scary, as I walk through that cave, eventually I come out on the other side, and it's not a cave, it's a tunnel. And I come out on this open, lush valley, and the sun is shining, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I carry on with my journey of life, and pretty soon I come to another cave. And I'm like, oh, well, last time it wasn't as bad as I thought, so I'll go in.
Hmm.
And then I come out and it's a bigger and better valley than the one before.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe that to people who are living in a state of fear.
Yes.
And you had said something that reminded me of my own journey where it comes in stages. It's like it prepares us for the next level of healing. In your book, you'd mentioning something about cycle breaker. And I quote, the one who had to fail many, many times in order to understand that I was bigger than everything that existed outside of me in my life.
Yeah.
And so, how would you describe that as in your own personal life? And I know you've kind of talked about it already, the different stages, but maybe more so, when did you realize that you were a cycle breaker?
I realized actually that I was a cycle breaker, I would say close to when I got separated and I kind of saw where I was going to go back into old patterns. And then from there, I needed to learn another, great humility within another relationship that I entered too quickly. And it just made me see quickly that I was kind of like, oh, I wasn't healed from that yet. And all of that got me to a point where I was wondering, like, where does this pattern start from? Like, it had to start somewhere. And so, again, my curiosity was even more I was gaining a lot more awareness at that point because I was going through more pain, like another level, a deeper level of pain
Yeah.
or suffering. So it's like I was transcending my suffering with curiosity, if you want, in that sense, where it was time for me. I didn't want to stay a victim, although we all go through it where we're in victim mentality and we don't understand. We just want to have answers and we just blame, the person, the people, our parents, whatever. But we have to go through that kind of process to really open up and get on the other side of it, where we see where it's all impersonal. It has nothing to do with me, you know.
Mm.
Yeah. So, sorry, what was your initial question? I just want to make sure I'm answering that question right.
Well, you kind of did, but it's when did you realize you were a cycle breaker?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So yes, exactly. It's in that moment that I saw that, okay, I think I'm the only one in my generation probably that is having this awareness of my wounds and whatever I'm, experiencing in my reality of intense emotional suffering comes from really far out in my generational, it's generational trauma. And not to be, arrogant with the generation in my family and say that I'm better than them, not at all. But I do believe that I am probably the only one who has that deep awareness of like, wow, this has been going on for a long time, where we all kind of have the same similar patterns in my family, and we are just repeating it with like, the next generation. And I don't have kids, but I would love to have kids at one point in my life. But I was like, if I want to have kids in my life, I can't continue to bring that energy to my child. Like I don't want that to continue. So it starts with me. And so that's why I was really yeah, I was really intense, I would say, in my practices to kind of like go deep in this and just to stop um, those patterns, those generational patterns that we have. And I wanted to free myself. So it wasn't so much because I wanted to honor my, ancestors or whatever. It was really just because I wanted to stop blaming for one. I wanted to stop um, hurting myself by not understanding why my family behaved the way that they did with me throughout my entire life, basically,
Mm.
and find compassion and stop blaming and realize why as well I never fit in and I never really connected to them and I felt like an alien almost within my family. Like there's so much of compassion that we need to have, but we have to have self-compassion as well. And we need to heal that part of ourselves. We can't just bypass that and say like, oh, well, I'm not going to blame my family. It's all good. They didn't really know what they were doing and I'm just going to move on. Like, no, you still have to see your inner child that was very wounded. You still need to go back and go and hug that child and be that parent for that child without blaming your family necessarily, but to at least acknowledge that, yes, you were hurt. And
Mm.
even if it's not their fault, then it's not like they didn't do that on purpose at all, because again, they were just wounded children in adult bodies themselves. Even if that's the case, like we realize at one point, like, okay, but we still have to go and love that inner child and tell them that they lack that love. And that really sucked. But then move on, observe it, embrace it, and then move on and be that parent for yourself your entire life, and be that adult, that mature adult.
So much. And um, I think that a lot of people resist going to, deal with their inner child because it's scary and it's painful. But I also believe that they're scared of what they might have to realize about their parents and who they were at
Mhm.
that time, right? Even because, they're like you said, their parents were just adult bodies with children and wounded children inside.
Mhm.
And they might love them. They probably do love them a lot, love each other a lot. And they're scared what they might have to admit that someone they loved did to them or how they hurt them,
Hmm.
right? By not healing themselves. And I love how the end of a relationship and that, secondary relationship triggered those questions within you to heal, because that was very similar for me as well. And I realized that I was continuing cycles that I was going to pass on to my children. And there was no way I wanted my children to experience what I was experiencing. Oh, I totally lost my train of thought now.
It's okay.
uh, I love that. In your book, you're right. This book is not about me and my personal experiences. This book is about you, the same you that is in me and I within you. Do you want to just touch on that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So the way that this book was written was actually letters instead of chapters. It was composed of letters. It's 21 letters that are meant to be read as if your higher self is speaking directly to you. So the way that I received the letters was for my own healing as well. But throughout this healing, and it's the same, everybody can relate to the same things because we all have the same kind of conditioning. It all comes down to pretty much, not everybody had the same experience as to, like, you see, like the way that you've learned was through the religion and all of that, but we're still in our core, we all have the same kind of fears, right? And so we can all see each other through, like, I can see myself through you, because I know that if I went through, rejection, or I went through maybe verbal abuse or condescendence or whatever you want to name it, all of those things, I know that you also went through that somewhere in your life. And so why I say that the book is not about my personal experiences and it's really about you is because I want people to see that I am the same as them, And so it's not because I wrote this that I have all of the answers. It's actually, we are both doing the work together in a sense, right? Where we're both relating to the same things and so the same understandings. And so if I was able to put all of this together, because this has been like, if you read between the lines, absolutely it is a lot of what I experience and what I've healed or what I'm still healing even. It doesn't mean that all of this knowledge and this wisdom is all integrated 100% within me. That's not true, because if it was, I wouldn't have received it that way. Like, there was a lot in this book that I needed to read myself to capture, like, oh my God, this is still something that I need to look at. This is still something that I need to heal profoundly and go and hold space for myself. So that's kind of why it wasn't about my personal experience. Like, if you see in the book, I'm not explaining what I've went through. I'm actually just, it's not me. That's the thing. It's my higher self that came through me that is speaking to you, which means that it's your higher self that is speaking through you. The same higher self. It's the same higher self. That's what I want to kind of like, I want people to kind of see it that way. That's why I said it in that way.
I love that. It's so true. Um, Earlier, you had mentioned your childhood left you feeling small.
Mhm.
And I noticed that one of the chapters in the book is titled, I Am Without Need. I can only imagine that the whole process of beginning to write this book, finishing the book, and then publishing it probably triggered some things within you regarding your sense of worthiness and feeling small, hey?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, the the purpose of the book was not about me. It was about helping people realign with who they are, reconnect with that higher self. And I didn't want to make it about my small self, the ego that is wanting to try and getting in the way. That's what I want to say. And so I really needed to again surrender to something, surrender to the unknown of where that book would go, how it would manifest into the world. And if I didn't surrender, the book would not even be published at all, because I would have made it about me, about the fact that I may not be, uh, I may not be worthy enough for people to even yet want to listen to what I wrote. And I really needed to get out of the way. And so yeah, so that part of me has been looked at a lot, the small self, like the me feeling small all of my life. It has been a journey, and it's still a journey today when it comes to like, who am I to kind of like bring people to understand parts of themselves? I'm not that special in that sense, right? And just to let something higher just take control, and to surrender to that part, and just say like, it's not about, recognition for me. It's not about even like, yes, I won this award, but it wasn't even about that. I've always just wanted to follow the calling that I received that day when I did sit down and write the book. And I needed to be ready to receive what people would say about that information in the book as well. So that was something else that I needed to get out of the way, because it's not my personal experiences. It was a little bit um, less risky for me, because it is a book that can be very triggering. It can be direct. It can be provoking. And so I I just needed to continue to talk to myself and say like, okay, well, the little girl doesn't need to be affected in this, because it's not the little girl that wrote the book. It's not the small
Absolutely.
self that is being dismissed, that has been dismissed, that wrote that book. That was a
Yeah.
co-creation with something that wanted me to bring out bring out the light from me, the thing that is natural in me, right? So it's always really, it's a process. It's a process with anything in my life. With it's even this is for me. This is a relationship. It's like I'm trusting this to do what it has to do, and I'm not in control of it. It's the same thing with
Yeah,
any relationship.
absolutely. The whole process of in writing the book and learning to surrender and releasing your attachment to the outcome of how the book would be perceived,
Mhm.
and following the guidance of your higher self to write the book, um, and quite possibly I suspect process the feelings of smallness that you had as a young child. Did that make the award so much better?
Well, like again, I'm not attached to anything, or I try to not be attached to anything outside of me. So the award was to me very nice to receive, and I'm grateful, and I do appreciate the recognition, because it was really, it was hard work in a way, just
Yeah.
putting out the book out there. And so it was validating, I would say. But if I look at it at a perspective of like, yes, again, like I do not want to live my life where I identify myself with what my accomplishes. Like I even speak a lot
Mhm.
about that in that book. That's why I always had to say, stay humble. um, it's fun to have won that award, but it will not define who I am as a writer. It will not define who I am. Like I've always said, like peace is the most important thing. So I will not let anything come to my head, even if it seems to the outside world like it's a really big thing. For me, it was I don't I don't put a lot of like bigness to what is happening outside of me anymore. And
Mhm.
it's not because I want to dismiss anything of importance, but I kind of know what is actually the truth. And that's for me is the simple fact that I breathe, and that I exist, and that I'm here in the moment. And then I just don't attach to any titles for that matter. And I
Yeah.
I really do try to to not attach, because that's what causes us again to identify and then to be disappointed about whatever we're receiving or not receiving. And so yeah, to answer, if that answers your question right, it's fun, but it does not identify who I am as a human being, and not even my writing for that matter. My writing
Yeah,
is beautiful and I know it and I love it. It's my passion, but even the writing does not define who I am as a person.
absolutely. And as I asked that question, I realized I was phrasing it wrong, but I interpret your answer as you've received a internal validation,
Yeah.
right? Because so often in life we do all these things, relationships, hobbies, whatever, just to get validation, which is always external. And when you get that internal validation or validate yourself and love yourself truly, none of that other stuff really matters.
No,
And
exactly.
and, and I love that so much.
Mhm.
If you could, and I know this might be difficult, what was your biggest healing experience or self-discovery experience through the process of writing this book?
It was actually letting go of the situation that I was in at that point in my life. Was another kind of like phase in my life where I was basically almost depressed, to be honest, in a way. I don't say stay depressed long because I know how to alchemize a lot now, but it was still it was a death of an identity that I really needed to die from that.
Mhm.
Um, it's kind of like I felt like the universe just looked at me and said, now that you're empty, because now you don't have a choice to let go of all of that, because you can't continue to identify and hurt yourself with what is happening in your life. Now I can come through you and tell you how it really is. And you can actually, you're very receptive now to understand the impersonal life. You're very receptive now to really get who you are without anything that is happening to you. Because as much as we like to say, like, we're not being a victim and we're not wanting to stay in the victim, that we're also creating stories, and we're also resisting the expansion and resisting the humility in what we're experiencing. So I was at a place where I had no choice but to become humble and very humble. And so going through the process of my writing it was beautiful, but it was also difficult, because even though I was flowing very nicely, and in that sense it was loving, um, I was dying of something still. And rereading these letters were at points where I was like, who the hell is that? Because I was like, I can't believe that in the state that I am right now, that I can even receive what I'm receiving, because I'm just like numb almost, because I don't know where I'm going in my life. And so yeah, I would say that it was very difficult, and it was a really deep healing moment for me. It changed a lot of things. And then it didn't mean that I was like completely healed, and then whatever the next steps were going to be, that it would go really nicely and there were not going to be any more contrasts. Like, there were other contrast experiences after that, after I did that. And even the process of like, I really want to, I want to have someone who's aligned with me to publish this book, because it's not, this is really, it's my humility, and I want this to be in the right hands so that
Mhm.
it's well received. And then it was kind of like, okay, what do I expect now of how people are going to see this? And even like reading the reviews on Amazon of people that may not be in alignment with this. And I've had someone who completely tried to dismiss everything in my book just because it was not in alignment with Christianity. And so I've been called dangerous with this book. And so that there's other things like this is my work. I always have to look at different perspective and see like this is not about me. When someone is reacting the way that they're reacting is because they're reacting from a place of a wounded place where they're suffering. So again, it's like I wasn't done with my healing and it was fine, but it was kind of like all observing it and just
Mhm.
it made me really, really evolve a step more. Just writing the book. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think being called dangerous by someone who is coming from a point of their own conditioning and too scared to face that conditioning, that's a compliment. That's that's how I would perceive it. And well, we're not going to get into the religion, but you know, being able to question everything you know about yourself is very scary, but
Mhm.
it's so rewarding. It's very enlightening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much for that. I have so many more questions. Unfortunately, we can't be here all day. Where can people find your book?
They can find it on Amazon. So amazon.ca.com and even .uk. Yeah, they can find it there. They can go also on my website if they want. I think that you probably would put the information in the comments or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, lettersbyellie.com. They can find it there as well. There's also a audio version for those who are not so used to reading and they love or they prefer audio. There's an audio version that's really cool to listen to as well. It's a totally different experience from reading the letters. You're actually having, yeah, it was a really nice experience for me to even hear it. I am not the narrator, but the woman that did it really sounds similar to me. And so she did an amazing job at really capturing the vibe, the soothness, it's beautiful. Yeah.
That's amazing. And having the right publisher and the right narrator for the book, that's so important, especially
Yeah.
with a book of this nature and how deeply personal it is. Thank you so much for joining us, Ellie. I I could talk about this for a lot longer. I'm definitely going to read your book.
Thank
Um,
you.
I just wanted to finish with a paragraph from your book.
Sure.
The only time that is the most important is the present moment. It is you reading me without any outside distraction, feeling your breath and your heartbeat as you recognize me, who is really you, loving you so much right now. I love you even when you are not aware of me. When you feel pain emotionally, the pain would not be felt if I did not love you. The pain is a sign that in that moment you are not being me. It disappears quickly when you surrender to me and see the truth about who you are. That is probably the most beautiful thing I've read in the last 10 years. I
Oh,
love
thank
it.
you so much. Thank
And
you.
and thank you for sharing your gift with the world. I love that so much. And thank you for coming on the show. To my listeners of this podcast, thank you for joining me on this crazy ride we call life. It's an amazing ride. I'll see you on the next one. As always, much love,
Thank,
Laverne.
thank you, Laverne.